Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the NGP podcast. We are shooting in the FDR Library on the east side of Manhattan. I'm joined today by two of our civic fellows who attend our civic forums or once a month on Sunday. And I'm also joined by our director of publications for Next Generation Politics, the national organization, Matteo Portelli. So I'm going to hand the microphone down with these wonderful people, and then we'll jump straight into our discussion.
So we basically had a discussion about the kind of highly polarized and the extremism that's happening in our politics currently, especially with the past midterm election, which happened last Tuesday, and basically discussing how we think, the way young people are voting is through kind of the knowledge that they're gaining, I guess, through like media, and the way that highly polarized media is actually affecting people's views because it's filtering out certain information or highlighting certain points that really stay with people while omitting other information. So it's creating a more biased perspective, I think. And that's a really big issue that's going to be occurring continuously over these next few generations and elections. So
I think something we spoke a lot about was predictions for what will happen based on these midterm elections. And so either the increase in bipartisanship and cross-partisanship, or I think the fear that this will only create more polarization and more divide because of these news sources, because of a desire for people to other in order to further their own perspective.
I mean, we see this with the results, okay? So Democrats took the House, Republicans took the Senate. And in my initial estimation, this seemed that I looked at it as a good thing. A lot of people don't like congressional gridlock, but if all that's going to pass is bipartisan bills, that's not too bad of a thing. In our groups right before this discussion, in my room, we had heard a talking point that this may actually be a negative. That now that we have the Congress split, Republicans now have the perfect scapegoat. They can blame the House, and the Democrats can blame the Republicans and the president for no legislation happening, for nothing getting done, and then this benefits their campaigns. And so we'll certainly see what happens in the next few weeks. And our speaker today from the New York Times had outlined that when litigation gets through as to whether or not voter suppression occurred or other instances of unethical happenings in certain state elections, we'll see the effect that this had. But for now, I think this can only go one of two ways. Either we come closer together or we come farther apart.
Okay. So I guess segueing straight through into the midterms, we saw a record number of youth votes, so 18 to 25 or 29. I'm not pretty sure, but so we saw a record number of those types of voters, those young voters who have been rallied around the either right-wing Turning Point USA or something near that, or the left-wing March for Our Lives, which was very generalized around gun control. And I think my concern was that both these groups create, single-issue voters. Yeah. Most of them are going to go in and only vote for a candidate, especially now that it's their first voting cycle, only vote for a candidate that supports gun control or is totally against gun control. No one's really going to hear the whole platform of debate. And I feel like as they grow older, maybe they will, get more of, civic literacy to understand every single platform. But for right now, it's great that everybody's voting. It's a good starting step, but only 30% of them voted. So is it really that great? We need more people voting, but we also need them to know what they're voting on. Yeah. We can't have them circulating talking points around and not really understanding what politics is and what civics is, and they're just voting for one issue.
I think we definitely applaud engagement, but more than that, if they're only rallying around one issue from one specific perspective and neglecting to listen to the other, they're ostracizing, I think, in terms of the March for Our Lives, the Republican perspective. What are we becoming as a society, and what are we inspiring in the next generation? I mean, only further political divide.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I think what's happening currently is that we're kind of placing labels on all different opinions on different political issues instead of actually delving deep into how we can come to a consensus or what the actual solution would look like. We're kind of just we're labeling this liberal, we're labeling this conservative, and because of that, once you hear that label, you immediately have this stigma of just going, no, like that's wrong, instead of actually listening to what everyone has to say, and that's really the basis of political discussion, which I think is kind of depleting right now.
So we were all born post 2001, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. My birthday's tomorrow. But anyways, thank you. So we've grown up in a world in which we know nothing but politics being a dirty word, right? I've never been in a classroom discussion. I've never been in, frankly, a familial discussion in which politics was exalted to the degree that I think it should be. From Aristotle, politics comes from the Greek word politica, meaning the affairs of the city. And back in the day, I mean, it was considered a civic duty for Romans to go out and vote, and so too was it with the Greeks. Today, with, as Thanasi brought up, organizations such as Turning Point and March for Our Lives, though we should celebrate the involvement and the engagement that we've seen, it does breed single issue voters. And the unfortunate thing is that with social media, having the power that it has over our youth today, and some of our parents, the influence that has, I don't think we fully understand the ramifications of. I don't think we understand that we should really condemn political voter apathy. But I think in the same vein, we should also condemn apathy of, how would you say, apathy of everything else but this one issue. So I think we need to foster both at this, civic issue and in our politicians, debate and discourse on not just, gun reform, but also healthcare and education and other things.
I think something I've said a lot is if we want to be the change makers of our generation, we first must change the tone, the tenors, and the balance of our conversations. So I think to your point, how do we as Gen Zers, as people who really want to increase the civic education and civic engagement of the youth, how do we change these tenors of the conversation?
I think we also have to stop. As Gen Zers, I guess, we like to be entertained. We're very instant gratification.
Yeah.
Amazon Prime one-day delivery type people, right? And I'm guilty of that too.
one?
Yeah, the drones coming down from the sky, dropping your latest, order of makeup or video games to the door. It's super nice. And I think the same thing for TV. People want to be entertained. And we now have this new breed of kind of celebrity politicians who have millions of followers on social media, who get, people like Beyonce to open for them at political rallies, people who bring down, these great celebrities to make them a celebrity. And then people people get focused on how cool they are. They wear the same shoes I wear. And, they wear Supreme and all these things. And it's that's great, but when we grow up, we're not going to care about what the politician wears or who sings at their event. We're going to care about what their actual policy is. And I think we need to get away from the whole holding these politicians on such high levels. Yes, they are celebrities in a sense, but we need to be examining what they're actually saying, not who's opening for them at an event.
I think, no, I 100% agree. Their perspective, their ideas, their beliefs, their ideas for legislation should be far more important than, the fact that Beyonce endorsed them. And so how do we create this shift, especially because we are this technological generation where, I think people use Instagram at least an hour and a half a day. Yeah. How do we create this shift in perspective and in values so our national political stage doesn't become the Kardashians?
Yeah.
So the president of the Foundation for Economic Education, Lawrence E. Reed, or W. Reed, one of the two. I think it's Reed. He stated that the difference or distinction, and I'm going to paraphrase here, between a politician and a statesman is that the statesman looks to better his constituents, remembers that he's there because of his constituents, and therefore serves for a limited time, for when he believes he can serve, and then retires back to his private life. I have grown up in an era, and I believe we all have, in the era of career politicians, where we have politicians making a career, making a life out of being in office. And in my opinion, that's a perversion of what service should be, public service in representation. But when you speak of how do we change the youth mind when it comes to the almost unhealthy level of social media that we use, or gossip and drama that some of our peers may propagate, right? How do we change that? I think it begins at the fundamental level. I said this before that the United States of America is founded on a layer cake of organization. Where we have our families, and then we have communities. For some people, it's religious, parishes and whatnot. And then we have the city, and then we have the county, state, and federal. We are in a hodgepodge of organization. But at the root of it, it comes down to the individual. It comes down to the family. So it begins with changing how we speak with our parents and our siblings, and how we speak with our friends. And hopefully, in due time, when we grow up, we live in a world that promotes decency and respect. And then that affects legislation when we get to vote for people.
And adding on to the idea, I guess, of decency and civility when having these discussions. I think it's kind of speaks to going back to the polarization argument, how now it seems like both sides, like the Democrats and Republicans, instead of actually maybe either agreeing with like their senators or their representatives, they're kind of thinking more like anti the other side. So if it's like, if you're on the Democratic side, it's not that you support everything that the people who are representing you support. It's just that you believe that anyone on the other side is speaking wrong, I guess.
I also think the other issue is that we're kind of. Oh, were you not done?
No.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. So I think the other issue that we have is that we're also, you know, built upon hating the other side because they're wrong. But so many people are so quick to say, "Haha, you stupid liberal or stupid conservative," but no one is quick to like sit down and like, what do you actually believe? Like, yeah, like maybe I'm conservative in economics, but I'm superly socially liberal. Like, it's not one or the other. But people don't understand that, and I think. Ready for the product plug? I think NGP and other organizations like NGP, right, need to push that it's about listening, it's about talking, it's about the actual issues. It's not about, you know, the glitz and glamour and the nice lights and the nice cars and the nice shoes and Beyonce. About not to hate on Beto O'Rourke, right? He ran an amazing campaign, but yeah, like it's not about that. It's about what he's actually saying. So.
Yeah, I read this book called Republican Like Me, in which it said that our views haven't changed in the past 25 years. It's our view of the other that has become increasingly negative. And I think we have this tendency, as you said, to put people in this box, to say you are your identity, you are this specific belief, and to ostracize them because of it. I think, very similar to you, I am more fiscally conservative and socially liberal, but that doesn't make me, you know, a Trump supporter or an Obama lover. I am who I am, and I vote, or I will vote, based on those beliefs. I think as we talked about in this forum in particular, it starts in the school environment and your layer cake. And so we need to foster this environment in our schools that encourages authenticity of belief and people to share willingly and to listen to others.
I remember that the governor-elect of Nevada, Steve Sisolak, right now, he said that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. And well, yeah, and Tanasi brought up the exact point of what NGP is supposed to do and other organizations. Yes, we want to promote civic engagement, but and that's the cornerstone of what we are doing here. But before that, the necessary prerequisite is to listen to other people and foster discussion and debate with the intent not to beat the other side, not to destroy the other side, as so many YouTube videos may claim, but to promote active discussion and recognize that, look, I don't know everything, but I know enough to know that I don't know everything. And thus, having discussions like this, on and off camera, hopefully we learn more by listening to other people. You mentioned something that our current sphere of politics has no longer become about what I believe, but what they believe, and I don't agree with what they believe, therefore I'm voting against them. I think it was CNN who did an exit poll, and they, you'll research this for your own, but I think the poll was about 2/3 of poll participants said that the way that they voted in the midterms was not based upon candidates, but based upon President Trump.
Exactly.
2/3, meaning, so there's a disconnect there, and that's something that needs to be addressed. That our voters are no longer voting about what they want to vote about, but voting upon
What they don't know.
what upon another individual who they don't like. So there's that.
Yeah, and going off of that, I think there's also an important point that was brought up by our speaker today, Alexander Burns, from the New York Times, and he was talking about how this sets a dangerous precedent now for future politicians or presidents, that anything that's less than the extreme acts or morals, I guess, of our current president is going to now be considered normalized because we've had President Trump. And also, I want to respond to Mateo talking about discussion and debate, because I believe that not only do we need to debate, I guess, about these topics, but also deliberate, I think. And the difference, I think, is that with debate, you're kind of thinking about, I guess, winning the argument more than reaching a consensus or reaching a conclusion. Or kind of a solution, I guess, to the problem, which I think is really what's necessary right now.
So, in Model UN, all right, in Model UN, the goal of the entire activity or the competitions that you go to is to compromise and solve the problem, and that's how it should be in, Congress. But we were talking in my U.S. history class, and someone asked the question, do you think politics will ever go back to the way it was in 2008? Like calm, I don't care if you what your politics were, but like it was calm. There wasn't like this over dramatization of like what the president ate or what restaurants your favorite senator was going to, because no one really cared. They only cared about how they were going to get money in their wallet, how they were going to feed their families, how they were going to care for their families, and that's what they cared about. And they voted based on what they felt. There was no push or pull based on who the president was on your congressional representatives. Now that's totally different. But I think we really need to make an effort to listen and talk and understand that everybody has their own opinion, and that liberal does not mean they want to let every immigrant in and they want to, take away all your guns and they want to, raise your taxes and get free health care for everybody. And conservative doesn't mean that they want everybody to have guns and they want to close the borders and they want to, be racist to everybody that's not the same skin color as them. No, the distinction that's been made, both parties have demonized the other party, and it's just a mudslinging match. Politics is only going to get worse, in my opinion, until someone comes to the podium, the presidential podium, who's not Donald Trump, who's not Hillary Clinton, who is someone moderate, either side, who's going to go, okay, let's fix the country, let's end this lunacy. If that's even a word, it's just it hurts my brain to see everybody get so angry and caught up in politics.
No, I totally agree. I really think we can't overgeneralize, and we can't equate. I think this is what happens in my school and in the New York community, because it is very liberal. We can't equate liberal to moral. I don't think, as I said, overgeneralization. We can't, equate one party to this and another to that. We really need to delve into, the beliefs of oneself, and what do I think?
Oh, but I'd actually also want to respond to the point you made about someone coming along and being kind of this moderate, I guess, either liberal or conservative, in order to bring everyone together. And I want to bring up the question, would that actually make a difference? Because as we've seen with the recent elections, it's actually the highly polarized people, the highly extreme people, who are the ones that are being elected because they invoke such strong feelings among our population. So I want to open that question up, I guess, to the floor.
So demagogues have existed since man, I think. I think it's a good way. Like you'll never not have people who are able to captivate citizens, and you'll always have people who can do this. I'm a bit of a nerd for US history, but I like to, whenever the question is brought up, can one person change it? The American Revolution, and I'm not a historical scholar, so take my word with a couple grains of salt, but the American Revolution to me seems to have been incited by Thomas Paine. The revolution in the hearts of the citizens, I mean. Thomas Paine was an Englishman, came to America, thought of himself as American, and wrote a couple pamphlets. He was a pamphleteer, one of which is Common Sense. I'm sure that we've read it before. I have it in my backpack over there. Thomas Paine outlined, his beliefs. It was a rant more than anything as to why he believes that, Britain sucks and that why we should change our political institution. And my estimates may be off, but I'm fairly certain that there were between 75 to 250,000 of these pamphlets printed. In 1776, there were about 2.5 million Americans, which means there was one pamphlet for between every 30 and 5 Americans. That is ridiculous, how pervasive that this one man's opinions were able to spread through America and thus captivate the Americans. So I think that that's my go-to response when it seems, can one person change it? My answer is yes. My answer is one person has the influence. If granted the opportunity to speak, and if granted the opportunity to debate, any one of us can change the world.
So we're going to go into some closing points of, I know you guys wanted to do the whole Thomas Paine debate, so we'll get to that, I promise. We're going to go through some closing points on everybody. We'll just go around. So you can rebut to Mateo's Thomas Paine statement.
Okay, so in response to your point about Thomas Paine, well, I do agree that obviously an individual can make a huge impact. But in terms of whether it's going to be an extreme individual or someone who's, going to be more moderate, I guess, that's kind of questionable. It's particularly because Thomas Paine was very, supportive of America branching off from Britain, and he supported the revolution. So he did have, I guess, at the time, a more extreme perspective. Now, obviously, it seems normal to us because we're America, but and also adding on to that, the way that he instilled change was by getting the people involved, because the big thing about Thomas Paine was that he opened up the political sphere to the public, and so now the public was able to have these political discussions that they weren't able to have before. I think that's the big, I guess, takeaway of Next Gen Politics is that now we're trying to get the younger generation, trying to get people involved and educated about their political systems and how they're being represented, so that now they can actually instill change and they can actually make an impact on our world.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
so, yes. You need, how can I word this? Amendments to society necessitates the society's consent. That's a good way of putting it. The people have to agree that, yeah, you know what, I agree with that opinion, let's change. My point with Thomas Paine, and with any individual, Thomas Paine was a radical. And the Sons of Liberty, they were basically domestic terrorists. That's a good way of putting it.
Radicals of their time.
They were radicals because they had a goal of changing the political sphere, like structure of America. The difference is that I can see, and I'm not equating. I'm not going to use an example of Hitler. Let's use an example of Hitler, and I have a purpose for. No. I have a purpose for this. I say this because he's the go-to example of extreme demagoguery. Yeah. And you see this with Mussolini. You see this with Stalin and Lenin and Mao. These individuals were able to captivate a nation and carry out disgusting, awful acts. And they did that through the people, through the media of the people. By changing their minds, they were able to change the society. On the flip side, you have individuals such as Alexander Hamilton. You have individuals like Martin Luther King Jr. These are, like I said, individuals, but able to move a crowd and a people and a nation behind them. So the difference here is that what we see now with next generation politics and so many other institutions and organizations is that we are fostering discussion and hopefully making leaders of students with virtue and with morals. And that can only be, I would say that's only begotten through civil discourse. It's only through debate and discourse can we have leaders who rise to calls of a nation, such as Tanasi said. We will only get out of this through an individual, maybe through NGP, to foster change in the nation who has virtue and who has sincere desire to benefit the country. So that's my response.
So I was asked to give a little speech a week or two ago about what I thought NGP was, and this is not an ad because I'm not going to say what I wanted to say, but I'm going to say a little part of it. People with a cell phone now can do so much more than community organizers back in MLK's day. If Martin Luther King had a social media account, he could have gotten what he wanted to get done 2 times as fast, 3 times as fast. He could have captivated.
Arab Spring.
Yeah, he could have captivated everyone. Every single person, especially now, has the ability to change people's minds from the touch of a button. People can create an Instagram account, a Twitter account, speak their mind, gain millions of followers without ever showing their face. People can do so much more than they could even 20 years ago, and we still don't know what the repercussions or the benefits of that is going to be. We don't know if someone's going to use that to spread hate, which they already have, or to spread love and peace and acceptance. A civil political system, which is what we need right now. So it's pretty much up to everyone but us to get behind the person that they think will help the country. That's my closing remark. I don't know. Yay peace. Yeah. That's
Yay peace.
yay peace.
Are you gonna say something or?
I was going to give it, you go ahead. Unless you want the final word. Do you want the final word?
She doesn't want to-
Okay, then I'll give the
I
penultimate.
was told I was supposed to have the final word. I don't care.
I'll give the penultimate word. I'll give the penultimate word. You can get the final word.
Woo for organization.
Yes, second episode. Okay, hold on. So I had a discussion with my AP US history teacher about a month ago, and he was actually giving a lecture, and he's a fantastic man. He explained that his politics irrespective. So regarding his personal politics, the purpose of a teacher is to foster discussion in a classroom. And he said something that I really adored, an analogy that he gave, and I'm going to steal it. He explained that, and I'm going to paraphrase, if we picture America as a mountain, all right, and the apex, the summit, we have the American dream. Then, or another way, the American dream is the apex of a mountain of toil and suffering and strife and struggle. Then the only thing that conservatives and liberals disagree upon, or Republicans and Democrats or any other party and ideology, the only thing that they disagree upon is which path to take up the mountain. We all want to get to the top of the mountain, and there's no helicopter that we can take. So we need to, struggle through and climb up. But it's only about what paths are we supposed to take. It's not about saying, look, this party wants to destroy America, this party wants to save it. That's not what it is. So through NGP and through other organizations, that's what this is. Opening up the gates, and this is getting into a really convoluted analogy, but opening up the paths for people to follow to get to the top of that summit.
I definitely agree. And the paths we take, I think, need to be based upon compromise and about dialogue, about civil discourse and civic engagement. And I think something powerful that came out this week that I just kind of wanted to end with was the campaign of Max Rose in Staten Island, which turned that seat, which was originally red, Dan Donovan, blue. And when he was conceding Dan Donovan to Max Rose, who won, in Staten Island, he said, "We're not enemies, and Republicans and Democrats alike need to work together in order to serve the 11th District of New York." And so I think NGP and, our generation together, we need to work together regardless of belief to ensure a better tomorrow, to ensure that, this mountain, the top of it is reached.
Right.
So with that amazing statement of, coming together, kumbaya from everybody, I think we all agree that we need change, but I think some of us disagree on how to get there, but I think that's okay. That's what democracy is. So with that being said, I'd like to thank all three of you for joining this amazing podcast. Thank you, Mateo, for flying all the way out here, walking 10 miles with us in New York City for the first time. And thank you guys for watching. This is the second episode, so bear with our unorganized mess of a podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in a month.
Woo!
I'm sorry, I'm hungry.